Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Photographer Academy and today's webinar. We're lucky to be joined by amazing black and white photographer and landscape photographer from Australia, Richard White. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon to everyone listening.
It's midnight there, is it not?
Well, yes, it's past midnight.
Oh dear, I apologise.
It's my beauty sleep gone down the drain for today, that's for sure.
Speaking about beauty sleep, I suppose we better show the people joining us today actually a photograph of you, so at least they can kind of have some, at least kind of feeling for you actually being up past your bedtime, perhaps. Richard, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into photography and things?
How did I get in? Look, predominantly I was a petrol head. I used to go to car races as a youngster and buy magazines for that showed basically photographs of the car races overseas, the Grand Prix and the local car junkets as well. And I just thought, oh, that'd be fun to take my own photographs of the race meetings. So I effectively went out and bought a camera. And it just came with a standard lens, and of course the first meeting I went to, I was up in the stands and taking pictures, and of course the standard lens was absolutely useless. So that very next week I went and bought a telephoto lens, and I found that was still useless. But I was looking back through my images that I'd taken, and I saw a chap down on the racetrack with a camera in his hand, and I thought that's where I want to be. So I applied to the Confederation of Australian Motorsport to be a member, and it had interests, and I ticked flag marshal. I figured if I could get down on the track, that's where I would get photographs, and lo and behold, it happened, and before I knew it I was down there, and you'd have a camera over one shoulder, you'd have the flags in your hand. There were no armcos in those days. You were literally 2 or 3 meters off the track, and it was just absolutely perfect. And that's how I got going. And of course I then travelled overseas when I was in my 20s and took a camera with me and met people who were photographers, and from that aspect I just got hooked on the medium.
Brilliant. So I can see from your photograph there, you're obviously up to date with all the modern digital tech, the technology there. Do you just shoot on plate, or do you shoot DSLR as well?
Yeah, well, that's which camera is that one? That's an Ebony RW45 or 54, I think you guys say over there. And that I shoot sheet film, 5x4. I use Graphmatics, which holds 6 sheets, sometimes double darks. I also use a digital camera. I have a little Fuji XE-1 that I acquired just last year, and no, just this year, and it's been just fabulous. You know, it's a great little kind of toy. I use it as a Polaroid in a sense, and I also do colour work with it, but my black and white work I tend to use my view camera.
Brilliant. Richard, I think we should leave kind of having a chat until the end now. So I'm going to hand across the screen to you, and let's get on with today's presentation. If there is any chance, Richard, you could just speak up a little bit, that'll be good. Just okay. Some people are suffering with hearing deficiencies, I think, or your volume's a little bit low, one of the two. So I've handed.
I'll crank it up as high as it'll go. I don't know whether that's any better.
That sounds a lot better. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay. So let's. I guess you can see that, can you?
It's just coming live now, yeah. I will say we did test this morning, and we did have a little bit of a delay between images kind of being clicked on and coming live, so please bear with us today. But, Richard, I can see your screen. I can just see the grey slide at present. It's all yours.
Yes, that's my shot of a grey card. It's something I do quite often. Well, I guess if I just pick up from where I got into photography, once I got the bug and got started, I was desperate, I suppose, to do photography for a living. At the time, I had a really mundane job, and I'm always embarrassed to tell people when they ask, so I usually just mumble my way through it. And I actually met a photographer in Melbourne, Australia, and when I was given the opportunity to seek alternative employment from this company I was with, he said, now that you don't have a job, you can become a photographer. Now, he was a wedding portrait photographer. It wasn't something I really wanted to do, but as he said, it would get you into the industry. So I I started basically doing weddings and portraits, and I joined the AIPP, which is the professional body here in Australia. I did a lot of workshops to understand portrait work, and to also learn how to, I guess, deal with people, you know, because in portraits and weddings, that's pretty much what you're doing, and you've got to sum up situations. At that time, I also was shooting landscapes, and just so you don't look at a blank screen, I'll bring one up. And then as time and a half went by, I guess I got burnt out with doing weddings, and I just had to give it up. I did it for about 10 years. I think in that time I had also moved to the country Victoria, northeast, where our mountain range starts, the ski area, and the area known as the high country. So I was shooting weddings up here, and I was doing landscapes as well, and the weddings just got the better of me. As I said, I was burnt out, so I just effectively one day pulled the pin on it and said that's it, and started concentrating on landscapes. So what I've done today is selected a few that I thought I would talk about and tell you, I guess, some of the so-called luck that that one gets, and also some of the planning that that goes into the pictures. This shot was taken in, what would it be, southwestern Victoria, an area called Swan Lake. There's no lake, there's just sand there. And I'd always wanted to go and photograph dunes. I'd seen a lot of the dunes in the United States, and I sourced out where they might be in this country, and of course a lot of them are in Western Australia, which is just an eternity away from here. But I found that there were some down in Victoria, so I went down there and I made this shot in the early morning. Now, I figured that it was worth coming back there that afternoon. I checked to see where the sun would be coming up, and the very next picture, which will come up shortly, was something that I captured in the afternoon. I remember returning there and walking up and down dunes, and I started to see this amazing cloud formation just appearing on the horizon, and I just thought, oh, I've got to find something at the bottom to put on this, or to put under this shot. And it was then that I started to panic, because you could actually see the clouds moving, and I thought it's going to go before it finishes, before I get the shot. So I'm trying to run up and down sand dunes, and if you know how hard that is, you can imagine, you know, what I must have looked like. There was a little low breeze blowing, which caused sand to just blow 2 or 3 inches off the surface, so I had to get my camera out, keep my bag up off the ground. But I managed to find a dune with this beautiful light just kissing across it, and the clouds just kept on coming. I ended up, I think, making about 2 shots, and and the cloud started to break up. You can probably see just on the horizon there that it's starting to thicken up, and these wonderful kind of fingers of cloud just disappeared. But that was, you might say it was a tad lucky. I just happened to be there, but if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have got it. That's the long and the short of it. Assuming the next picture has come up. In 2008, I was in the UK. I went over there to teach a workshop with Joe Cornish in Scotland, and after the workshop, my wife and I decided we would do about 10 days, 2 weeks in the southern part of Austria and in Italy. And this was taken from the I can never pronounce the name, but that beautiful castle in Salzburg. And we were up there just basically doing a bit of the tourist thing, looking at it, going around it, and we thought we'd stop for a coffee, and there was an outdoor cafe there, and I just happened to walk over to the wall. I looked over and I saw this amazing scene, and I just thought, oh, how fantastic. And at that time I just had a 35mm film camera with me with black and white film in it. So I took my jacket off and put it on the wall and set my camera up and waited. Just people were coming and going on the paths, and then I saw these one person appearing and somebody coming on a bike, and I just thought if I can get them to be exactly where they are and hit the button, then I've got a picture. And that's basically how it came about. I felt a little guilty sipping on coffee while I was waiting. It's not something that I usually do, but you know, sometimes you do get lucky. The next shot is a picture of snow gums, which are taken in the high country. This is probably about an hour from my place. I literally live at the foot of the hills, and on this particular day it was overcast. I'd been camped up there for a couple of days, and I was making a journey along this track in a four-wheel drive, which you need when you're up there. You can't access these places with two-wheel drives. You literally need a Toyota Land Cruiser or a Pajero. And I remember driving through this and stopping, well, actually stopping just about where it was, and thought, oh, there's a picture here. But for some reason I didn't stop. I kept on going because I was heading for a hut that was a bit further on. And I made a couple of pictures down there, and then when I drove back, the light hadn't changed. It was still pretty much the same, and I stopped and turned around, and I thought, I've got to do this now. So I set up and made the photograph. This was actually made with all my black and whites are made with film. This was made with a medium format camera, a Bronica GS1, which is no longer available. You can get them on the second-hand market. And my attraction with this picture, apart from the beautiful snow gums, which is so lyrical and speak volumes, just with their shapes and style and design, but the path cutting its way through, and that was really the thing that attracted me to the photograph. Printing this is a little tricky. You can see where the light's hitting some of the high spots, the light spots on the trees. So I needed to control that in the printing, which, well, I guess once you've been printing for a while, you learn how to get around things like that. This next picture, more sand dunes. They were taken in Death Valley, in the US, of course. And I'd gone over there to, as part of my self-training, to do a workshop with a photographer, Bruce Barnwell. and we went out onto the dunes, and there was literally too many of us. There was, I think, about 18, and we spread out, and I set up. I saw this picture and I set up, and just as I was about to push the shutter, I saw a person appear on the, if you look on the left-hand side and come down to that that light part, just standing up on that dune there, and I just, you know what it's like. I guess a lot of you do. You look and you think, get out of my picture, and because this was early morning, we're literally only 10 minutes after the sun's come up, and the patterns in the dunes change so rapidly, and everything alters. And I just didn't want to lose those foreground ripples, and certainly that nice dark band that's cutting right through the picture. And I thought, oh, if the sun moves and I lose all of that, my picture's gone. So I'm standing there cursing and, you know, yelling and whistling and screaming. Of course, it was too far, and the chap next to me said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to take 2 shots, and the first one's with a 22. Fortunately for him, he moved off the dune. He must have heard my comment. Bit of ESP there, I guess, and I made the picture. So I was going to say I was lucky, but I actually think he was lucky. The next picture, I hope you can see it. This is a church in, I think it's called Bunda, B-U-N-D-A-H, an Aboriginal name. It's in Queensland, in southern Queensland, and I was taken there by a friend of mine to do some photography. When we arrived, I thought the time of day was all wrong. You know, it was really too bright. It was something like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and not the best light for shooting landscapes. But as it turned out, I looked to see where the sun would go down. I had a rough idea of the angle it was falling. And what would have happened is the light would have gone off the wall here, and it would have changed the picture altogether. So I thought, well, I'll try and make a shot here. My idea behind this was to try and get these layers with the tin roof, and then the 2 windows, and then the picket fence in the foreground. What was important for me was that I moved the camera in and out to get the amount of space between the pickets and the bottom of the window to coincide with the top of the window and the roof. So that to me was really important, that was about even. And the other thing was I purposely positioned that center picket, the thickest one, as close to the center as I could, because it just seemed to have balance. And this to me is more a picture of design than it's still a photograph, but it's more about design because of the symmetrical parts of the window and the roof and the fence. So I made a shot, and I ended up making a postcard or a greeting card from it, and it's something that you know, I find rather pleasing, even still to look at. The next picture, he says, counting 10 seconds, hoping that it's come up, is of a tree fern in the Yarra Ranges, which the trees behind are mountain ash or alpine ash. I had been to this place about 2 days previous. I was at that time I just started actually doing a calendar on Victoria's national and state parks, and I was going to all the national parks and the state parks within the state. And this is the Yarra Ranges National Park. And I'd been up this track and I didn't see anything. I was really disappointed. So I headed off to Melbourne. There's, I think, 2 or 3, I can't remember now, 2 or 3 national parks in Melbourne, a couple of state parks. And I spent a couple of days down there making some photographs. And then on the way home, I was coming by the same area. Now, it's drizzling with rain. There's a fog bank coming up the hillside. It seemed like it was following me as I was driving. I was dead tired. I just wanted to be home. You know that kind of feeling. You've had enough. You don't think you've got anything. And the car literally turned itself off the road and down this track again, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. I drove about a K up the track and said, to hell with this, and turned the car around. I came back almost on the roadway where this was, and I saw this tree fern and the thickness of the fog, and I just went, wow, that looks fantastic. I spun my car around. I had a Pajero at that time, which has a door that swings open normally, not a tailgate. And because it was still drizzling, so I had a blanket in the back of the car. I opened the door and I threw the blanket up the top and onto the roof. I put 2 tripod legs onto the ground and 1 in the car. I was kneeling in the back, squatting in the back, and I'm trying to get my camera out and get the film out, and because I could see that the fog was not going to last. And I managed to get off a couple of shots, and literally the fog cleared. You could see the road, you could see all the garbage and the rubbish, you know, past the fog. But I just knew I had a picture. And you know, from being dog-tired and fed up and wanting to be home, it just lifted my spirits. I couldn't wait to get home. By the time I did get home, it was pretty late, but first thing the next morning, I processed the film and dried it. The day after that, because I like to, you know, let the film dry for a day, I made a contact print, and I think I made a print exactly, you know, at the same time. So you might say I got lucky again, or the car knew what was going on, but I didn't. This image was taken, this next one of the canoes was taken in Nepal, in Pokhara. Just excuse me. I had gone over with a group. I was leading a group over there to do a 10-day walk around the Annapurna Sanctuary, and as an introduction to the start of the workshop, I said, let's just go for a walk down to I don't want to say the wrong word of the lake, I forget what it's called now. And I thought, let's see what we can find. And we came across these boats. Now, I didn't take a tripod with me. I just didn't really think that I would find anything. But at the top of these concrete steps down in the water, here's this collection of boats. It reminded me of a sow and its little piglets coming in for a feed. So I just thought, oh, I can't go past this. So once again, I you know, stripped off, took as many clothes off to soften the camera, because I used the top of the stone pillar where the steps went down, and I used that as my tripod, balanced the camera on there, took a meter reading. It was, I think, offhand an 1/8 of a second at about f/16, and I made one exposure, and we moved on, and nobody else felt that they needed to take a picture. I guess they didn't see what I saw. I've always understood that we all do see differently, so I still couldn't quite believe that they wouldn't be quite excited by this. Oh, I also remember I took my wallet out and put it underneath the lens just to raise the lens up a bit. Now, this was an omen for this picture because some years later, Kodak in the United States asked me to submit some images, ironically, to go on the front of their digital paper box in the US, and this was one of the images they chose. So I made a few dollars from it, which was nice. I also asked at that time whether I could have a couple of boxes of 10 by 8 Tri-X film, because I just purchased a pinhole camera. And when I thought 2 boxes being 2 boxes of 50 sheets, 2 boxes to Kodak in the United States meant 10 packets of 50 sheets times 2. So they sent me 500 sheets of film. So that made me smile, as you no doubt would understand. This next picture is of, this is a part of the Canadian Rockies, Mount Wilson. I was in Canada visiting a friend of mine who's a photographer, Craig Richards, and when I arrived, he lives in Canmore, which is near Banff, and I flew into Calgary. And when I flew in, the temperature gauge inside the airport said minus 38 degrees Celsius. The guy, I'd organised an airporter to collect me and take me to Canmore. The guy came in and I said, surely that's a mistake. He said, hell no. So he said, the car's running, it's outside. So we made a beeline for the car. It was absolutely freezing. I couldn't breathe when I went outside. I had to come back in and wrap a hanky around my mouth so I could actually draw air in. When you're breathing that temperature, it burns the back of your throat. It was just quite terrible. Anyway, I got to Canmore and Craig was there shoveling snow out of his driveway. And a bit later on that evening, he said, I got to take the dog for a walk. I said, it's minus 38 degrees. He said, no, it's warmed up a little. It's only about minus 30 at the moment. So I went for a walk with his dog and him at minus 30 degrees. It was quite incredible. The next day, we decided to take a drive up the Cumbria Icefields Road towards Jasper. And we had an agreement that he would have the left-hand side where the steering wheel was, and I had the right-hand side. We had stopped, and at several places we got out. The outside temperature then was minus 25, so they'd had a heat wave overnight. And we would get out, we'd photograph, and we'd get back in the car. My fingers, my toes, my nose would absolutely be aching. We'd crank the heater up just to get some circulation going, get some warmth back in, and we would press on. We'd do this 3 or 4 times. When I saw this shot, I said, Craig, you got to pull up. So we stopped. We set up, and as soon as I clicked this picture, he said to me, well, you look at that, and I literally turned my head about 45 degrees to the right, and up came the next image, which I think should be up now, something that I call the Angels of Mount Wilson because of the bauxite rock behind the granite there. And probably for the next 20 minutes, we photographed this ever-changing cloud coming in, moving, and just the whole atmosphere that was happening. We got back in the car and we were buzzing like you wouldn't believe. And Craig said to me, how are your fingers? I said, fine. How are your toes? Not a problem. Is your nose still attached? Absolutely. And it just shows you that when the adrenaline runs and when you really get excited about capturing an image, you know, all of that stuff, all of those sort of physical things just go out the window. You're so caught up in the moment that it just works for you. So that was probably the best picture that I took on that trip. The next image is of a snow gum in the high country. I'd seen this this tree kind of glowing off in the distance, and I thought, I'm going to get over there and have a look at this. I parked the car and grabbed my camera and tripod and started to walk towards the tree. And literally, as I did, it was, I should add, when I arrived, there was a perfect blue sky. As I'm walking across towards this tree, this cloud just rose from the horizon. It was just quite extraordinary, and I just watched it move across the sky. It was like somebody was dragging a blanket up, you know, over the earth. The sun was still, you know, coming through because it was behind me, and I thought, wow, how fantastic. I set up, I made, I think, 2 or 3 images and packed up and walked back to the car. By the time I got back to the car, put my gear away, it was blue sky again. I mean, I don't know what to make of things like that. Is it luck, or is it good fortune, or are the gods being kind to us? But that was extraordinary. This next image is pretty uninteresting and dull and flat. This was made in the Dolomites in Italy, and we had arrived in Campitello in the afternoon and threw our bags into the guest house, and I said to my wife, I'm just going to go for a walk, see what I can find. And I came up to the top of the road and saw this scene, and I thought, well, I'll make at least I'll have a record of it if it fogs in or something happens tomorrow. This was taken in the evening. The next morning it was clear, and I just want to show you the difference that you can get when light plays a really important part in the scene. So the very next morning, this is what I was greeted to, with that light just coming across the rocks and the trees, and it just transformed the whole landscape into something that I thought I had to make a picture of, where the one before I really only did it for a record because I just didn't have my little camera with me. And I just wanted to remember it. But this just shows you how important light is in a picture, and I think, you know, light is the thing that makes all landscape photographs. Design is terrific and helpful, but light really is the key element, and that was something that happened, you know, that very next morning. This next picture is of the Sydney Opera House. Now, I'm not a big one for photographing icons because they're done to death. If you want a great shot, buy a postcard. So I tend to, you know, ignore them. I was in Sydney. This was first thing in the morning, and I was on the North Shore. And I walked through this archway, and I turned around and I saw the Opera House, and I thought, wow, this is different. Now, when I say I don't like to photograph icons, if I can make a picture that I've not seen and that I think is not a basic or a kind of traditional shot of a well-known landmark, then I'll make it. I've been to the Taj Mahal and made pictures that I think about 4 billion people have got the same shot, you know, the reflection in the pools and so on. And you do it as a record and to have your own, but you don't do it to actually display it and say, look at this, look, you know, gee, what a great shot this is, because everybody's got them. But here, I feel this is just a bit different for the Opera House, and just a way of showing a great landmark, but putting some more interest into the photograph. A bit of a bitch to print this one because we're dark inside the archway, so I had to hold the exposure there and of course hold the exposure on the outside, but it required a fair bit of burning in just to get it to a nice level. Although these days with digital, everybody does 2 or 3 shots, different exposures, marries them together, and Bob's your uncle. But I like to try and do things in the camera and in one hit, and I'm not one for you know, doing heaps of Photoshop stuff. I just I always say nature has its own Photoshop. You know, I don't need to add anything to that. Although I take all the colour out, so I'm just contradicting myself in a way, aren't I? This was made with a pinhole camera. I call this photograph Portrait of 3 People. Just my zany sense of humour, I guess. I'd been to this place. This is Kiama on the east coast of New South Wales, just down from Sydney, and I'd been running a portrait workshop there for 3 years, and this was the 3rd year, and I'd noticed these handrails for the steps going into the pools that they have in New South Wales. They have a lot of swimming pools that are rocked in but serviced by the sea, so when the tide comes up it fills them up, and then when the tide goes down, the water stays in the pool and people can keep swimming. And it's also safe because New South Wales is on a surf coast, so it's pretty dangerous, you know, up and down most of the coast. It's not the easiest to swim, so they have this collection of places all up and down the coast of New South Wales. So on this last day we were kind of having a bit of free time, and these 3 people actually walked out onto this rock, and I saw the handrails and I saw the people, and I had my pinhole camera, and I thought, oh, I've got to do this. So I ran out to them and said, guys, just stand still for about 30 seconds, or as still as you can, while I make a picture. So I came back and made a picture. And if you don't know what a pinhole camera is, it's effectively a box with no lens, but a pinhole for the lens. So the aperture on my pinhole camera is 256. So you can imagine sometimes your exposures can be, longest I've made is 25 minutes, and the shortest I think is about 3 minutes. No, on this particular day it was about, I said 30 seconds, it was actually about 45 seconds. That was a rarity. Most of them are around the 2 to 3 to 4 minute mark. But fun and games. Pinhole photography is certainly worth trying because you often don't know what you're getting because there's no viewfinder or anything. You just kind of have to point it and guess. This next picture is taken at Milford Sound in New Zealand. It's a pretty straightforward shot. People go there, everybody takes Mitre Peak, which is the one on the left. The reason I put this picture up is just a little small point. That tree that is in the middle of the photograph, what was really important here was that it didn't break the horizon that's behind. I wanted to keep it within in the base of that line of that ridge line going past, and I felt that if it protruded into the sky, then it breaks that continual line. So I really had to work hard, you know, fully extend the tripod, and I remember I grabbed a case I had with me and stood on it just to get that extra bit of height. But that's that was just a little thing I thought I should point out. This next picture is is not of a bikini-clad woman underwater. It's actually of an ice particle in the high country. This was made with a Fuji XE-1, not my XE-1 that I ended up with. I borrowed the XE-1 to give it a test. I didn't have time to get my view camera out because the sun was coming up, and it was imminent to break the just come over the hill and you know, hit the ice and just change the whole look of the photograph. So I used the little digital camera and made this shot of the ice, and effectively it was almost monochrome to begin with, and then just turned it into a black and white, and well, I guess that's all I can say about it. It's just, to me, it's really interesting shapes. It's got some nice balance with left and right, and a picture I like. Whoops.
Richard, we're coming to the end of the session now. I've got lots and lots of questions to ask.
Sorry.
Is there any specific image that you want to chat about before we kind of move on to questions?
No, well, look, the last two, I won't talk about them, but I'll just mention they're just a couple of pictures that I've got in a couple of books that I'm in the process of doing. This one, have you got a bunch of trees up there on the screen at the moment? Can you see that one, Mark?
Yep, we've got them there.
They're manigums down on the Howcall River, which is in the high country, and I'm actually doing a book on the high country, which I hope to have out next year. It's been a long process, but it looks like it's coming to fruition. So that'll be one of the pictures that I'm putting into it. And the next picture, which will come up shortly, is something I actually made in England in 2011. In the Cotswolds, and I was on my way to Heathrow effectively, and it was drizzling, and you know, I thought, no, I'm not going to stop, and I just happened to see this out of the corner of my eye, and you know, it just appealed to me because of its design and so forth. And this image I'm doing in another book that I've been working with a lab in Victoria. We've been working on this for about 7 or 8 months to get the pictures exactly right. It's one of those, it's not a blurb book or an iPhoto book. It's beyond that. They've got a new technique that I've been testing with them and getting help from Kodak to do this. And this is going to have 50 pictures, and each one of them is going to have a story relating to the photography, about my philosophy behind why I took it, how I took it, what inspired me to take it. So it's kind of a bit like an Ansel Adams, The Making of 40 Photographs, and that's what that's the other one I'm doing, and I hope to have that ready next month.
Will that be available on national sale, or is that just actually available through in Australia?
Well, it's probably only going to be available through my website, and because it's something that's a little untested, I'm only going to limit the number of books to 150, and a print's going to go with the book, and they're going to be released in batches of 50, and you know, all of those fine details I'm still just working out, but it's because it's untested water for the way the book's going to be printed. I don't want to, you know, do an offset printing run where you've got 2,000 books or 1,500 books. I want to make it a bit more exclusive, and I guess, and it's a tester for me. So hopefully it'll be interesting for people to read and get a bit of an insight into why I make pictures.
Great. Okay, I'll just take the screen back from you a second, if that's okay, and we'll do some quick-fire questions, if that's all right. First of all, can you talk about any filters that you use in front of the lens?
Yes, I actually use Lee filters. I use a lot of grads. I use not too often. I've got an orange filter and a deep yellow filter, which for black and white you tend to need to use quite a bit. But they're the main ones that I use.
Okay. Do you use the big stopper and things when you actually, do you shoot a lot of water, or is it pretty much the landscape that you shoot?
Oh, look, the landscape. I've got a big stopper. I've used it a few times, but like anything, I think you've got to use it when it's appropriate, not just because you've got it. And if I don't come across anything where it's not going to work, then I'm not going to shoot it. But it's sort of also it seems to have become a bit of the flavour of the month, and when everyone's doing it, I lose interest. I want to do something else.
Yeah. What about hyperfocal length setting on your camera? Do you use that at all in your landscape pics?
No, I did when I first started in photography. I remember learning about that, and somebody challenged me with that the other day, and I had to really go back into the archives of my mind and think, oh, what is that again? And worked out. But no, I just I focus. I use a loop on the the ground glass of the camera, and then set the appropriate aperture that I feel will work.
Cool.
So it's really standard and basic and as simple as I can get it.
Typically for you, because obviously you're traveling with heavy kit, it's not the lightest of cameras to kind of trudge around, as well as a tripod, of course. Is it a bit of an expedition every time you go out? Are you going out to make the photographs? So have you done your research in advance, or are you just actually going for a stroll and kind of fingers crossed you're going to kind of fall onto something?
I think there's a bit of each of that. If I'm going somewhere new, I'll do a bit of research on it. I've got maps of so much of the high country, so I look for anything that might stand out from that. But also, I like the chance of finding an image too. Just that unexpected thing that might happen. Like the picture at under question time of the people on the path. I mean, I had no intention of making any shots really like that, but it just happened. So I'm open to everything really, but I'll research where I have to. I've just been to the UK and Scotland. I went to Skye in the Outer Hebrides, and I did a lot of research on places there to go and look at, and that was fantastic, and found a real little gem because I saw a picture from somebody else, and so I had lucky moments and I had planned moments.
And why have you stayed with film and not really kind of gone down the digital route?
Well, yeah, good question. Look,
it wasn't mine.
No, I think sometimes I ask myself that. I think because I spent such a long time in perfecting my craft of film and understanding film, and then printing in the darkroom and making prints, to the point where I guess I have a reputation for that now, and I still love printing in the darkroom. I still love making prints, and I think there's nothing more satisfying than hand making a photo, like actually seeing it come up in the developer and just doing the little alterations that you do. I don't get the same satisfaction on the computer. it's sort of a bit too quick and I dare I say too easy, because I know it isn't. You've got to still have skill to do it, but the basics are pretty easy. You know, curves or levels and a few layers here and darkening this part and using the lasso and all of that stuff. You know, it can all be done all too quickly, and I don't feel that also you get the same result in a black and white picture. I still think that a darkroom print on fibre paper is unequal. You know, it's richer, it just seems to evoke a lot more feeling and just a lot more depth to the image. So I guess with all of that, I just stay with film and really film pictures or digital pictures, if people don't like the picture, they're not going to say, what did you make that on? There's your mistake. They're going to say, gee, I like the picture. And often nobody asks, how did you make that? You know, it's that part of it's irrelevant, but I just happen to still enjoy film and darkroom.
Brilliant. Do you ever scan your negatives to bring them through the digital route at all, or are you completely trying to stay away from digital fully?
Oh no, I do scan the neg sometimes. I like to see whether I can sometimes either get the same result that I get in the darkroom, or I'll do it before I get into the darkroom to just check a few things, you know, like contrast and stuff like that. It's not often I do it, but I have done it. I have done it for magazines when I'm doing articles for a magazine. If maybe I don't have time to make a print, so I'll scan the neg and then just do the corrections, and because once it gets into a magazine, it's rubbish anyway. The quality is as good as it is. It's not fantastic. So there's those exceptions.
When you're selecting the paper to print on, have you got a particular taste at all? Are you multi-grade, or are you all? How do you decide what to print it on, as it were?
Oh, okay. Well, I certainly use multi-grade. I remember when that came out and just loving it. You know, Polymax was really the paper that got me hooked on multi-grade paper, and it's just so fantastic because you've got so many grades in one box. You don't have to worry about graded paper and having several boxes. Now, you know, of course, Polymax went, but nowadays I use foam from the Czech Republic, which is a beautiful paper. It's very rich in silver. It tones beautifully. It accepts bleach nicely. You know, it doesn't sort of get away from itself, and it looks fantastic. And generally, I go with what they call a gloss, but it's not a gloss that we think. It's not a semi-matte either, or a satin. It's kind of in between, but it's just got a beautiful texture to it, and that's my preference. I also use a warm tone paper occasionally. I like to do that with people. It kind of adds to that, and sometimes at the seaside, you know, if there's sand or warmer tones in an image, then I might use a warm tone paper.
Do you use a different paper for your exhibitions compared to your general print?
No, same
yep.
paper.
And any special chemistry?
No, Dectol. I've been using Dectol for...
Still around, is it?
Still around, yes, and it's probably one of the one of the best or easiest also developers. I use D76 for processing my negs, which I'm using Tri-X film. Sounds like a plug for Kodak, but we all know Kodak's been sold.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple more, if that's okay with you, and then we'll kind of bring it to a halt. An interesting one here, in fact. Because you take so few images, what is your percentage success rate? That's a really I mean, I could answer that, but I want you to answer it because I think that is a really kind of looking backwards question, really. I think that is a question that defines digital photographer, if you understand what I mean. So again, because you take so few images, what is your percentage success rate?
Yeah, well, look, some days you can get lucky. I remember last year going out, making 4 images in the morning, and I printed 3 of them and used 3 of them. I do a high country calendar every year in black and white, and I think of those 3 images I used 2 in that year and 1 the next year. So that was a high success rate. Now I've just come back from the UK, and I took 48 neg shots, so black and white negatives, and I think I took strangely enough about 180 digital shots. Some of those were just record shots of where I was, and others were purposely made shots. But I find that with film and with the 5.4 black and white film, most times I'll make 1 negative. That's all I need. You know, I can't see the point of making 2 or 3, but when I shoot with digital, I tend to do 2 shots. I don't know why that is. I guess it's the days of when I was shooting tranny film for colour, I'd always take a couple because, as a friend of mine always said, it gives you a choice of exposures rather than bracketing, you know.
Excellent. I thought that was quite a good one to end on, in fact, really. Jay, I know you've got a question there about Fuji Camera, yeah?
I do, mate, yeah. This one's for you, Richard. Obviously, you mentioned mostly been talking about your 5.4 images, but you do mention that you use now the XE-1, but you did trial the X Pro one, and the question was, they're very similar. Why did you choose the EX1? Is it more useful for landscape photography?
Well, interesting question. I actually had both of them side by side. Now, the X Pro one has got an optical viewfinder. I still like a viewfinder rather than the back of the screen, and it's also got a electronic viewfinder. Now, the electronic viewfinder on the X Pro one is pretty crappy. The optical one is fantastic, but when you put, which I have, you know, filters on the front, it impedes into the image, so you can't see it. The XE1, they improved the electronic viewfinder, like you wouldn't believe how much they improved it, and also they just upgraded a few things in the speed of autofocus and so on. And with the electronic one, of course, you can look through. I can have the filters on the front, which I use grads for that as well. And I've got a little Lee holder, I think it's called the RF75 or something like that. And that just, you don't see it. So that was really one of the critical factors that made me go with the XE1, because you know, if I'm in a market area, or if I did some photographs of a cattle sale, and you know, I've got the camera to the eye all the time looking around. Well, you can't do that if something's impeding into your vision. You know, it's hopeless. So that's really why I chose it.
Oh, that's great. Answered my question perfectly. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Brilliant, Jay. Do you want to do the finish for me?
Yeah, certainly. Well, obviously, I'd like to thank Richard for his time and some incredible images. Richard's obviously mentioned that he's got 2 books in the process, so I presume, Richard, best to keep an eye on your website for more information on that. I've posted the links a few times out today, and I will post the link to your website on our Facebook page as well today. So is that the best place for them to keep track of you there, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to shoot me an email just to be notified of that, I'm happy to, you know, respond to them. I won't bombard them with a whole bunch of junk that seems to happen, or just keep checking. You know?
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you again for staying up for us, because we got the better end of the stick this time. We've got 1 o'clock here in the UK, and obviously I know it's well past your bedtime, but we've had some great feedback, people loving your images, and it's been a fantastic insight. You know, we're all so used to digital now, including myself, and I've almost forgotten, you know, the days where I learned, you know, the old darkroom skills, and again, just truly inspirational images. Mark, can we move to Australia, please?
Yeah, sure. I don't think we need any convincing at all, do we?
No, not at all. So again, I'd like to thank Mark for hosting. Richard, thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to check us out on the Photographer Academy Facebook page to keep track of what we're doing, and hopefully maybe we can talk to Richard about coming back to us. Like I said, we've done some film with Richard. We were lucky enough to shoot with him, albeit the weather not that great, but Sam has informed me that we've got some great footage with him that we'll have on the site soon, so keep an eye out for that. And again, thanks to you both for joining us today, and thanks for joining us at lunch. So we're all going back to work now, or I'm going to get a quick sandwich down me. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks again, Richard.
Yeah, pleasure. It was good fun.
Brilliant. Speak soon.